I sold that godforsaken house to the young couple without a word, knowing full well I was serving them up as a meal for the Sasquatch. We sat in the bright, sterile office of the title company, the air conditioner humming a soothing, civilized rhythm. The girl, her name was Sarah, was beaming, clutching her husband's hand. They chattered about reconnecting with nature, about a digital detox, and how lucky they were to find such a secluded cabin for such a steal. I nodded. I smiled. I slid the pen across the desk so they could sign their own death warrants. My hands did not shake. The shaking had been left behind in the woods, along with my humanity. It all started 3 months ago. I bought the property up in the mountains, hoping to escape the city noise and a failed marriage. The cabin was perfect. Thick logs, a stone fireplace, no neighbors for miles. For the first 2 days, I basked in the silence. By the third day, the silence grew dense, like cotton wool packing my ears. And on the fourth night, the world turned upside down. I did not wake up to a sound, but to a vibration. The floorboards beneath my bed shuddered, as if an earthquake had struck. Then came the sound, a dull, wet thud of wood striking wood. Boom! The cabin walls groaned. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering in my throat. Another impact. Boom! The sound was coming from the front door. Someone outside was hitting it with something massive. I grabbed the fire poker, my only excuse for a weapon, and rushed into the living room. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking into a shrill scream. "I have a gun. Get the hell out of here." In response, silence. The absolute ringing silence of the forest. No snapping twigs, no footsteps. I approached the door and tried to slide the deadbolt. It clicked open, but the door itself did not budge a millimeter. I threw my shoulder against it. Nothing. It felt as if it had been welded shut from the other side. I darted to the window. The shutters were closed, but I distinctly remembered leaving them cracked open to let the air in. I yanked the latch, threw the panes inward, and found myself staring at bark, the rough, dark bark of a massive pine. The trunk blocked the entire window frame, tight, without a single gap. Panic washed over me in a cold wave. I ran to the kitchen window, the same. The bedroom window, blocked. Someone or something had encased the house in tree trunks while I slept. "What the hell?" I whispered. My brain frantically searched for a rational explanation. A prank by the locals? But to lift logs that size, you'd need heavy machinery. I had not heard any engines, no tractors, only the quiet night forest. I pressed my ear against the barricaded door. From the outside came a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was not a bear's growl or a wolf's howl. It was a clicking sound, a rhythmic, dry clicking of a tongue dissolving into a low, guttural grumble. And something answered it. From the other side of the house, and there were several of them. I stood in the middle of the dark room, clutching the useless poker, and realized I was not in a fortress. I was in a box, and the lid had just been slammed shut. I was faced with a choice that my life depended on, though I did not realize it at the time. I had an axe. I could try to hack through the floor or the roof, but the ceiling was high, and I knew there was a stone foundation beneath the floorboards. Chop through the walls? That would take hours, and the noise would only draw their attention. Quiet, I told myself. Sit tight. They'll leave. They're some kind of maniacs, or I do not know. They'll get bored. I decided to wait. I decided to conserve my energy and supplies, to turn into a mouse, to lay low. It was a fatal mistake. I thought I was hiding. In reality, I had just obediently sat inside a tin can and waited for them to get hungry. Outside, there was another knock. Delicate, almost gentle. Thump, thump, thump. They were testing the strength of their construction. They were not trying to break in. They were locking me inside. Day and night lost their meaning. Inside the cabin, an eternal darkness reigned, diluted only by thin slivers of light breaking through the chinks between the logs of my dungeon. The air quickly turned stale, heavy and oppressive. I spent 6 days and nights in that coffin. The first 24 hours I spent by the door with an axe in my hands, flinching at every rustle. I did not eat, only drank water from the jug, rationing every sip. I still hoped it was some kind of twisted prank, that at any moment I would hear laughter and the sound of a car driving away. But I heard only them. They did not leave. They lived around the house. I heard their heavy steps, slow, deliberate, proprietary. The earth shuddered when they passed. Sometimes they approached the walls and rubbed against the logs with their stiff hides, making a sound like the purring of a giant cat. They were discussing me. I was certain of it. Their speech consisted of whistles, sharp clicks, and low, guttural hoots. It was a complex language, the intonation shifting from curiosity to irritation. On the third day, the water ran out. The thirst became torturous. I started licking the condensation off the windows, but it was not enough. Fear gave way to a dull, aching despair. I realized that the quiet mouse strategy was not working. So I started digging. I pried up the floorboards in the corner of the kitchen, breaking my nails and tearing the skin off my fingertips. Beneath the wood was earth, dry and hard as concrete. I dug with a spoon, a knife, with splintered pieces of wood. After half a meter, my improvised tunnel hit solid rock. The cabin stood on bedrock. I howled in impotence, lying in a pit, covered in mud and my own urine. The bucket I had been using as a toilet had long since overflowed, and the stench was unbearable. I went back to the cracks in the walls. Through one of them in the kitchen, I could see a narrow strip of the yard. What I saw on the fourth day nearly drove me completely insane. A massive hand covered in matted brown fur deposited something soft onto the porch. It was a deer carcass, torn open, half-eaten, and already beginning to rot. A cloud of flies swarmed above it. "Why?" I croaked through cracked lips. "Are you feeding me?" But they did not push the meat inside. They just left it on the threshold. By evening, the smell of decaying meat mixed with the foul air inside the house. I understood their plan when I heard the scuttling of small scavengers outside. Raccoons, rats, maybe foxes. They were not feeding me. They had turned my house into bait, a long-term cache. They were creating a zone of death and rot around the cabin. I was just part of the process, the living core in a pile of carrion. On the 5th day, I started drinking my own urine. It was disgusting, warm and salty, but it gave me a few more hours of life. I was degrading. I ceased to be a man named Arthur. I became a creature living in the dark, sleeping on the floor in its own filth, and gnawing on the wooden leg of a chair to quell the spasms in an empty stomach. Sometimes they knocked. Thump, thump, thump. Delicate. Insistent. I screamed back at them. Kill me. Do you hear me? Come in and eat me, you monsters. In response, there was only a satisfied hooting. They liked that their lunch was still fresh, that it was still reacting. My mind began to fracture. It seemed to me that I could understand their whispers. Wait, they were saying. Let him ripen, let him soften. I sat in the corner, hugging my knees, rocking back and forth. The axe lay somewhere nearby, but I no longer had the strength to lift it. I was broken. I was ready to die, just to make it end. I dreamed of the door opening and jaws clamping shut around my throat. The seventh night began just like the others, with a symphony of terror. Outside, something heavy paced in circles, periodically dragging something sharp against the rough-hewn logs. Scrape. Scrape. The sound vibrated in my teeth. I lay on the floor, staring into the blackness, feeling life drain out of me drop by drop. I no longer wanted water. I did not want food. I just wanted the dark, eternal darkness. Suddenly, the scraping changed pitch. It became louder, more demanding. Then came a sound that, in my state, rang out like a cannon shot, the screech of wood against wood. I lifted my head. In the living room, at the blocked window, something was shifting. The sliver of moonlight grew wider. The massive log barricading the shutters was sliding aside, inching along in jerky, heavy movements. At first, I thought it was a hallucination, a dying delusion. But then a stream of fresh, cold night air rushed into the room. It hit my nostrils, washing away the stench of urine and fear, the scent of pine needles, the scent of freedom, adrenaline, which I thought had long since run dry, flooded my veins in a hot wave. I did not think. Ancient animal instincts took over. I scrambled on all fours toward the window. I pulled myself up to the sill. My hands shook so violently I nearly slipped back inside. The window was open. The path was clear. I tumbled out, falling into a patch of stinging nettles. The pain was sobering. I scrambled to my feet, staggering like a drunkard. The forest was silent. The moon bathed the clearing in front of the house in a ghostly silver light. Run. Everything inside me screamed. Run before they come back. I took a step, then another, and then I heard it. A quiet, wet snort. Directly behind me, I froze. Slowly, very slowly, I turned around. It stood 10 yards away, at the edge of the tree line. Massive, at least 9 feet tall, a mountain of muscle beneath matted fur. Its eyes, glowing yellow in the dark, stared right at me, not with rage, not with hunger. It looked at me with disgust. I waited for the lunge. I waited to be torn apart. I was easy prey, emaciated, barely able to stand. But the creature did not move. It just stood there, watching. Beside it, in the shadows, I made out 2 more silhouettes. They were all there. They saw me. Why are not they attacking? The creature made a short, sharp sound, like a sneeze, and turned away. It had lost interest in me, and in that moment, watching their retreating backs, I realized the terrible truth, a truth worse than death. I did not escape. They let me go. I looked down at my hands. Filthy skin stretched over bone. I smelled my own clothes. I reeked of feces, sickness, and animal terror. I was spoiled. I was damaged goods. They were not hunting me for sport. They were farming me. like livestock. But I turned out to be bad stock. I broke too fast. I dried out. I rotted alive in their tin can. In the wild, predators do not eat diseased animals if they have a choice. And they had a choice. They opened the can to dump out the trash. The house, my house, it was not my shelter. It was their feeder, and they knew a principle I was only just now understanding. An empty trap works best. If a trap contains a piece of rotten meat, nothing will enter. But if you clean the trap, if you leave it empty, warm, and inviting, fresh, healthy prey will inevitably wander in. I hobbled toward my car, which sat exactly where I'd left it. The keys were still in the pocket of my filthy jeans. I wept, but not from the joy of salvation. I wept from humiliation. I was not spared out of mercy. I was spared because I had become garbage. Back in the title office, Sarah finished signing the papers and slid them across the desk to me with a bright smile. "Congratulations, Arthur," she said. "It's officially our own little slice of paradise." I took the pen. My hand was steady as a rock. It had been a month. I'd scrubbed the filth off, put some weight back on, but the scent of the forest still haunted me in the dead of night. I was ruined. Medical bills, job loss, mounting debt. It had all crashed down on me at once. The police had listened to my rambling story about bears and blockades with polite skepticism. No one bothered to drive up there to check. I needed the money. I needed to get out of this state, out of this country, as far away as possible. But that cabin, that cursed cabin, hung around my neck like a millstone. No local would touch it. Rumors spread fast in small towns, but these two city kids, naive, bursting with life, fresh. I looked at Sarah's husband, a strapping guy, an athlete, 200 pounds of healthy prime meat. Sarah herself was glowing with vitality. "You know," the guy said, snatching up the keys, "we're planning to head up there today. We want to spend our honeymoon there. A whole month, just us and nature." "Oh, what's wonderful?" And my voice was flat, dry as dust. "It's very quiet up there. The signal is spotty, perfect for seclusion." An image flashed in my mind. Creatures watching from the tree line. They were waiting. They were hungry, but they were patient. They had watched me clean up the trash, scrub the floors, put everything back in order. They appreciated my hard work. Like an obedient servant, I had prepped the feeder for the new season. I remembered the look in those yellow eyes. There was intelligence there. Now I understood the rules of the game. In the forest, it's not the strongest who survives, nor the smartest. It's the one willing to sacrifice another. I had become part of their ecosystem. I was the jackal leading the lions to the antelope herd, just to scavenge the scraps. "Be careful with the fireplace," I said, standing and shaking their hands. "The flu can be temperamental, and lock the door at night. Wild animals, you know." "Oh, do not worry. We can handle it," Sarah laughed. I walked out of the office onto the sun-drenched street, the check in my pocket, burned against my thigh. It was the price of 2 lives. I got into my car and looked in the rear-view mirror. A survivor stared back at me. His eyes were empty and cold. I did not feel guilt. I felt relief. The mechanism was in motion. Now the shadows in the woods would get what they wanted. High-quality, healthy nutrition, and that meant they would not come looking for me. I started the engine and drove toward the airport. The deal was done. The pantry was restocked. Bon appetit